Mark Schlereth, I've been following you a long time, watching you forever, it seems like. And, man, it's an honor to finally get to talk to you, man. How are you?
I am doing great. It's a pleasure to be on with you, and I have thoroughly enjoyed all the stuff that you have done, especially the Nick Saban stuff, because I don't know why. I mean, it's awesome, obviously, but something about Nick Saban and just his old school football nature and just the curmudgeon that I just assume that he is. It makes me laugh every time. No matter what you do. When you were giving out Halloween candy as Dick Saban, dude, I was on the floor. It made me laugh so hard because I can imagine that being exactly the way he hands out candy. I just was so I've enjoyed your stuff, to be sure.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Yeah, I mean, he's there's not a lack of places I can put him that wouldn't be funny because of just thinking that he's always going to be in a pissed off mood. I always said that it's like someone just told him that he owes like $250 to fix something on his car. Like it's not something to like totally ruin your mood, but it's just something enough to kind of piss you off a little bit. That's like the constant state that he lives in,
Yes. Yeah, for sure. There's no question. So I've enjoyed that, man. Great job by you.
Thank you. I have to get out of the way as well. I mentioned that, I've been watching it forever, but my mom is she's a huge Mark Schlereth fan. She always had to watch when you were hosting Mike and Mike and loved all your NFL stuff. Now the games that you do for Fox, she's always super hyped about. So from my mom to you, getting the pleasantries out of the way, Mrs. Molinaro, big fan.
Well, tell Mrs. Molinaro that I thank her for that. I appreciate it. And it has been a wild ride, man. It's been incredible. From a guy that I retired and I thought I was going to take 2 or 3 years off just doing nothing. Working in the yard, and it lasted literally 2 weeks. And, I'm one of the world's neediest people. I just I entertain myself. I'm just in the kitchen bothering my wife. And she finally turned to me at one point after about 2 weeks and go, if you don't find somewhere to go and something to do, we will get divorced. Like, you are driving me nuts. And so I know that about myself. I'm social. I have to be connected. I always have a project going on around the house, or a project, that I'm trying to create, somewhere, somehow work related. So there's always something that I'm kind of just dabbling in, if you will.
So was TV always in the cards, or that was just like, hey, I'm social, I need to get out of my wife's hair, let's go try this?
No, TV, I had no real intention. I was doing a lot of public speaking as a player and enjoyed that, and so I thought, maybe I'll do some of that when the time comes. I dabbled in some radio, so I had some radio stuff that was potentially going to happen, but I hadn't agreed to anything. I wasn't in a rush at the time. And then I did HBO's Real Sports, and it was about injuries that players suffer and all this kind of stuff.
With Brian Gumbel?
Yes, with Brian Gumbel, but it was actually Jim Lampley who came to my house and interviewed me. Huh. And you know how at the end of that show, like after they present the piece, then the reporter sits down with Brian Gumbel, and Brian Gumbel asks him, some real inquisitive questions, you like the crime thing you did the other day, where you're like the first question, right? Like,
you're very, very in tune. Yeah.
Yes. So he basically asked him, like, well, what's Mark's plans after, now that he's going to retire? And Jim says, I really don't know, but he goes, what he should do is get into television. He goes, he was just tremendous on camera. And literally that played, and within hours, my phone started ringing with agents that want to represent me and agents that said, hey, listen, I've got an opportunity for you, I think, and would you be willing? And so at that point, that's about the time my wife was ready to divorce me anyhow, because I was just in her kitchen. Like, you can't get in her kitchen. Like, that's her domain. So, and so anyhow, long story short, I started taking some calls, and like a day later, 2 days later, I flew out to ESPN. I auditioned, and they hired me on the spot. So that's kind of how it all started.
That's that famous first audition picture of you, right? The one where you're kind of ballooned up, Mark Schlereth, or is that?
No, that's actually right after the Super Bowl. I still played a couple years after that, right after Super Bowl 32, and we went on that ballooned up picture was on Conan O'Brien. So we went on. It was the offensive line. It was myself, Dave Diaz-Infante, and Tony Jones went on Conan O'Brien, and literally, you know who followed us, was behind us? Like, this is how unfamous she was at the time. Angelina Jolie came after us on the couch. Like, I trumped Angelina Jolie. Nice. Won a Super Bowl and stink Angelina Jolie down here, you know. So so anyhow, that was right after the Super Bowl, and yes, I was on a very strict diet of taco meat and cheese was at the time, so I was a little bit puffy.
Do you feel like I feel like there's like a trajectory post career where you have, you know, the quarterbacks and the running backs who are, you know, the more cut up, probably more traditionally handsome guys during their playing careers, but then once they stop playing, the linemen and then you guys kind of meet here, and then the linemen pass them. I feel like the linemen kind of become the GQ good-looking dudes once they stop playing.
Yeah, they get distinguished. The quarterbacks just get old, you know? I mean, like, can you imagine? Well, I can't imagine Tom Brady ever not looking devastatingly handsome, or Jimmy Garoppolo for that matter. I mean, both of them are unbelievable. But for the most part, you know, the linemen end up losing weight. And that's usually what happens. The linemen lose a lot of weight, so they become more distinguished looking, whereas the quarterbacks end up packing on the pounds. And you have this vision of them as young players being, you know, chiseled, and then all of a sudden they're fat. And then the linemen are fat, who all of a sudden become a little bit more svelte. So I think that's kind of that, like you talked about, that kind of those two elevators, and when they intersect, you know, one going up, one going down type of thing.
It's so weird. Like, I kind of feel bad for the running backs. You know, they kind of have a rough go once they're done playing. Like, I feel like every running back I see, besides Terrell Davis, your guy, he still looks like he could freaking,
right.
You know,
I saw something on the web the other day, and TD still has a six pack. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Right?
It's the play, I swear.
I'm telling you what, it's if it wasn't for food, I would be really fit right now. But I just have like as a kind of an undersized offensive lineman that I was, you know, and just having this natural knack. As soon as I, like, for whatever reason, I always kind of compare it to, you remember the movie Rounders, when you know, when he's talking to Minnie Driver and he's like, you know, Beethoven could play the piano. It just made sense to him. She goes, yo, are you telling me you can play the piano? He goes, no, but like your schoolwork just makes sense. Like,
are you talking about Good Will Hunting?
Yeah, Goodwill. What did I say? Rounders. Good Will Hunting. Yeah. Same guy. You know, same guy. Different.
Okay, there it is.
All right. Right. So anyhow, but yeah, Good Will Hunting. So like the first time I put my hand on a 3-point stance, man, I could just come off the ball. What, like, it just made sense. I just could come off the ball. I was always good at that. And
sure.
And the bottom line is I gorged myself from the time I was probably 15 years old, you know, all through playing until I retired at 36. So like those habits, that's you know, what, 15, the math, 21 years of basically just gorging myself. So it's hard when I eat. I don't have whatever the signal is that your brain sends to your body that you're full. I don't have that. Whatever that is, I like, it's almost a competition. Like everything is a competition. I've always said, like, I don't care if we're washing dishes. I want to whip your ass at washing dishes. It doesn't matter. Like everything to me is a game. And so I sit down at the table and I'll eat. I'll never have that signal that I'm full. And then when I finally stop eating, I'll lay on the couch and I'm like, oh my God, why did I do that to myself? Like, I'm still that way.
Do you, so are you a big dishes guy? You do the dishes at your house? Does your wife let you do that?
Yeah, I am. Well, I call that trading unskilled labor for skilled labor, right? My wife is a phenomenal cook, and she cooks all the time. So I do the dishes. That's really the only thing that I'm skilled enough to do is dishes in the kitchen.
I'm with you, and it gets to a point where I kind of find it relaxing a little bit. You know, it's maybe I'll throw my headset in, listen to a pod or something. I'm just scrubbing away. You know, I do my chore,
right?
I get out of the way. You know.
That's exactly where I'm at. Like we'll have like if we have like Thanksgiving and stuff, and everybody's over, I'll eat really quick and then I start doing dishes as people finish. Like I'm the guy walking around the table. Are you done with that? Are you done? And they're like, no, I'm not done. Are you? Are you? Right? And so I grab plates and I just start going to town trying to get everything done. So I actually find it a little bit therapeutic. It's like lawn work for me. I love being in my yard. I love doing yard work.
Yeah.
I love, what I love about manual labor, and that's one of the things, probably one of the only things that I'm good at, is I love seeing something start and seeing kind of how it transforms from start to ending. And I'm big into kind of that visual aspect of going, okay, here's my plan, here's what I'm thinking, here's the vision I have, here's the starting point, and let me see how I can make that whole thing come to fruition at the end and go, wow, what a cool thing that is. And I love that aspect of yard work. I love that aspect of physical labor. I love starting a project and seeing it to its finish. That intrigues me for whatever reason. So I'm just kind of wired and built that way.
Seems like the football's still inside you. You get the play call. Everybody knows their jobs. You execute it all. It's like poetry in motion.
Yeah, for sure. There's no question. And everything that you do. I mean, there's a line in a song by The Alarm. I love '80s kind of alternative music, and one of the lines. It's the lifeblood that courses through my veins. And I just think of football that way. It is just the lifeblood that courses through my veins. I sit down probably on average probably an hour to 2 hours a day just studying football stuff. Study whether it's formations or route combinations or defenses, or I'm looking at somebody's running game, and I still consult for a couple of NFL teams. So it may be, hey man, we want you to walk us through wide zone and what you see that we're doing on wide zone plays and how we can be better, because we want to make that more of a focal point of our offense. And so all of a sudden I've got an assignment, and so then I start grinding and studying and writing down notes and what I think about certain techniques. And it's one of the things about football that's kind of lost to a degree, is the nuance of playing the game has been lost to a degree because of injuries and because of lack of practice time and because of all the different things that they're trying to implement from a safety standpoint. There's a lot of things that just don't get worked on. And so to me, one of the big influences that you can have as a former player is, how do you coach nuance? How do you teach guys the game when they don't get to learn it for themselves? Because the only way you truly learn the game is by getting your ass whipped, right? And then you start to realize, like, wow, I can't do that. And like it's for a quarterback. Like, you learn what you like and what you don't like by actually executing the play and going, man, in the red zone, every time we run this play, this is the focal point, and this really gets me, like, every time. Like, I don't see this or on this throw. And so you got to throw a couple of picks. You got to have a couple of bad plays before you realize, I can't do that. Or I want to stay off that play, or I don't like to run that play. But at least the pitfalls of each individual play that's called within a huddle. And so you never know those pitfalls. You never know the good or the bad until you execute them live. And you really can't do it in practice, right? Because it never looks the same in practice that it does, in a meeting on a grease board or on a Zoom call, or just in practice in general. There's a different speed, there's a different pace, and there's a different look to what teams do to you. So it's one of those things where if you can coach a little nuance and help people understand kind of, what those pitfalls are before they actually go through them, it can be helpful to an offense or a defense, or, whatever the case may be.
You thought about getting into coaching at all? Is that something you want to do?
I've had opportunities. I've had multiple opportunities, but I tell you, it's one of those things for me. I've grown accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and the thing about coaching, it's 18 hours a day when you're in it for the season, and sometimes I think I wouldn't be patient enough, or I'd go ballistic on somebody, and then I get canceled, because that's the way that everything operates nowadays. I like, to me, the great thing about what I do is, when I'm at home or when I'm with my grandkids or when I am fully invested there. Somebody really much wiser than me once said to me a long time ago, I can't even remember the context, but I'm really trying to be where I'm at. And I think that's just such a
simple but profound.
Right. And so like when I'm knee deep in preparing for a broadcast and I'm studying film and stuff, man, that's what I'm in and that's what I'm doing. But when I'm, taking my granddaughter on our taekwondo, she does taekwondo on Mondays and Wednesdays, and I take her. It's our date. Every Monday and Wednesday, we run up to Starbucks. We get a cup of coffee. She gets a vanilla steamer and a cake pop. Then we drive to Taekwondo, and I sit for her half-hour class, and I watch her do her Taekwondo, and then we drive back and we talk about what happened, and I am just thoroughly and fully invested in that hour and 15 minutes every Monday and Wednesday.
You're not willing to give that up, which is fine.
Right, exactly. So those are the things that are important to me, and I don't, at this point in my life, I don't want to miss those things.
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. That video that I think it was maybe like last year in the middle of the pandemic, your granddaughter, I forget exactly what it was, but she was talking about some private parts or something.
Oh, that's funny.
I can't remember exactly what it was.
Right, the dog. She was talking about our dog Romeo. And she says she at the time I think she was 3. Yeah, she was 3 at the time, and she was like, Romeo, I love everything about you, or something of that nature. Like she goes, she didn't say everything about you. She goes, I love everything of you. And then she started naming parts, and she's like, I love your fur, I love your nose, I love your ears, I love your that. And she goes, I love your penis, I love your. We're like, oh my gosh.
Oh, too good, man.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Are you still doing the football 101s on Twitter? You're talking about breaking down film and stuff. I was enjoying those a lot.
Yeah, I did a couple, and then I get busy doing other things, and those are things that I like. Those are things that, because like I said, I'm constantly studying stuff, and I just like basic, whether it's formationally, whether it's like route combinations and defense and things that like every player. And this is one of the things that I work on. And I may not be the best broadcaster, but nobody's outworking me. And, and I have fun. I just love it. And I'm just a football junkie when it comes to that stuff. And I'm fascinated by the length of my career, which I played for 12 years. And in college, I played both defense. I played defense for years before I switched over to the offensive side of the ball. And so I think I have a pretty good working knowledge of how the game is played. But I'm fascinated by all the things I don't know. And you tend to see life through the lens which you see life through. You see the game. For me, I call it peering through a straw hole. So when you watch as a former player, when you watch the game, you kind of get right like this, and you get focused on the thing that you did for a living. Sure. And that's easy for your eyes to just go whoop right there. Yeah. And so as an analyst, one of the things I've done is, I spent a lot of time with Mike Shanahan as a mentor of mine, trying to open the aperture on the lens with which I see football through, right? So I'm opening it up, and I'm trying to have a more global perspective. And it's fascinating when you look at the way an offense works, for instance, and you may, as complicated as it is, it's really simple. There's this crazy juxtaposition of simplicity with complexity.
Yeah. And
so, like, if you look at any game plan, every team runs the exact same concepts. They all the same passing game, whether it's high, low, in and out, 3-person flood on one side, whatever the case may be, they're all conceptually the same. And then you start getting into, well, how can we make this one concept to the defense look like 11 separate concepts? So we may be running a branch concept with an outside go and a 8-yard stick route on the outside, right? But we can run it from 4 different personnel groups. We can run it out of 10. We can run it out of 11. We can run it out of 12. We can run it out of 21. We can run it out of 22. We can run it out of all those personnel groupings. So right there, I just rattled off, 5 personnel groupings. Now all of a sudden it looks like 5 separate plays. It's the exact same play, and you really only have 1 or 2 guys doing something differently, right?
Okay.
Now all of a sudden we can motion from one formation to another. We can fly. We can start on one side, fly over, then motion somebody. And now we can do it out of all these different formation groups. So now all of a sudden that branch concept on the weak side of the formation or on the strong side of the formation, because we can run branch on the strong side as well, we can make that play. That's one play. It's one 2-man route combo. We can make it look like 12 different things in one single game. We could run it 12 times and never one time repeat the exact look the defense got. So for the defense, you got to decipher it 12 different ways. And the great coordinators understand, keep it simple, stupid, but make it look like it's complex, right?
Yeah.
And so it just
like when I'm watching the Rams, like I feel like the Rams run the same 3 plays and yet it's effective. And now you just explained why it's effective.
Right. I always call the Rams the illusion of spread. You know, I've talked to McVay about that. It's like, hey, we want to give you this illusion that we're a spread football team, and then we want to break your teeth running it. Like, right. And that's how but they do it. They're unique in that, like, if you look at the Niners and the Rams, it's identical offense because Sean McVay learned that offense from Mike Shanahan and Kyle Shanahan.
Yep.
They were on that Washington staff together. So it's the exact same offense, except for the fact that Kyle Shanahan wants to do it out of 2 backs, out of 2 tight ends, out of, take that fullback who at one point is the fullback is the F, right? And then all of a sudden it's the second tight end. The fullback's out. The second tight end becomes the F. The F becomes the adjuster. Then all of a sudden you're in 11 personnel and the F is the slot receiver. He becomes the adjuster and he does everything. Whereas McVay wants to do it out of 3 wides. And so that slot receiver does most of that F adjustment stuff, right? And it's fascinating to watch because it's the exact same offense, the exact same route combinations, the exact same formations done out of a different personnel group. And last year, McVay did a lot more 2 tight end group, simply because he had 2 tight ends that were pretty good. So he moved more into what San Francisco does. But it's fascinating when you start to really boil it down and really study it, and to see how teams get an advantage, how teams get edges, how teams create mismatches and create leverage as an offense versus the defense they're playing against.
What are the Broncos going to do in the draft? Are they going to get another quarterback? Drew Lock out?
I really don't think that they're going to draft a quarterback. I know that we overdraft quarterbacks and the narrative is, if you don't have a quarterback, I understand how valuable the position is. Yeah. I also understand from 2009 to 2016, there were 22 first rounders drafted, guys that were going to change your franchise's future. None of those guys are still on the teams that drafted them. So I understand how difficult that position is. Joe, like for me, I think the narrative has become, and I think part of it is just laziness. It's easy to sell, hey, we got a new quarterback. Everybody buy tickets and buy jerseys, and the sky's the limit. Like, what makes you think that the Jets, who just in 2018 took their future quarterback, the quarterback of the future in Sam Darnold, and basically got the shit beat out of him, and then we're moving on to the quarterback of the future in Zach Wilson, and now things are going to be different. And for me, I think there's
throws off. He throws behind his back and he throws off platform.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's what people think. But for me, I look at the situation. I say, I think there are 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the league. Like, honestly, there are 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the league that cover up warts, right?
Sure.
Like when I was with ESPN, when I first retired, Peyton Manning came in toward the end of my career, right? So I think Peyton Manning came in 88 or 1998 or 99, and I finished in 2000. And so for the majority of my career, I was covering Peyton Manning. And I used to say about Indianapolis all the time, and people in Indianapolis hated my guts. They just hated me. I go, that's an 8-8 team that wins 12 games every year because their quarterback covers a bunch of warts. And people are like, you son of a bitch, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. Well, Peyton Manning gets hurt and they go 2-14. Right? And I go, hey, well, I way overestimated the talent level of your football team. I apologize. You're right. But the bottom line, there's 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the league that will cover warts. The rest of the quarterbacks, to me, expose them. Right? I mean, think about Matt Ryan, who I think is an exceptional quarterback. Exceptional quarterback. He wins an MVP with Kyle Shanahan coaching the team, being the offensive coordinator. They run the snot out of the ball. They do great things. Then next year they go 10-6 after Kyle leaves to go to San Francisco, and then 7-9, 7-9, 4-12. The quarterback all of a sudden get bad? No, he's still throwing 26, 28 touchdowns versus 7 or 8 interceptions every year. It doesn't really change that much. The point being is if you don't build up a roster that can support most quarterbacks, like not every quarterback that's drafted in the first round is a unicorn. And the crazy thing to me that happens every year is they're like, well, next year's quarterback class is not very good. So wait a minute. So Joe Burrow was supposed to be a 7th or 8th rounder before he goes to before his senior year in LSU. He becomes the number 1 overall. Baker Mayfield was a 2nd rounder before his senior year, before his last year in college. All of a sudden, he's number 1 overall. Kyler Murray was supposed to be a 2nd to 3rd rounder. All of a sudden, he plays his last year and becomes the 1st overall pick. There will be 3 or 4 other guys that all of a sudden become Zach Wilsons or become, Justin Fields Justin Fields or Trey Lance. It happens every year, and they'll get overdrafted, and eventually 1 or 2 of them will succeed, and the rest will fail, and we'll keep going over the same circle. Think about this, Joey. How many times? I mean, like if you go through the history of the draft the last 10 years, and I haven't done this, but I guarantee you, if you went through the draft, you'd see Cincinnati drafting the top 10 every year, Cleveland drafting the top 10 every year, the Jets every year in the top 10, the Lions it's the usual suspects. Mm-hmm. Why don't they? Hey, man, they've drafted quarterback. Why haven't they figured it out? Because it takes it's the ultimate team sport. If you don't have a good football team, most quarterbacks can't elevate you to that supreme, upper echelon like a Peyton Manning does, or a Brady does, or Aaron Rodgers does, or a Russell Wilson does. There's only a handful of those guys.
Right. Yeah. It's just a cycle. Like you said, it's just they get caught up, and it's like, well, we got to do this. We got to get the big name. We got to get the hope one before. Yeah. No. It's so. Do guys who or ladies do people who cover the draft and all these, because now we got mock drafts everywhere. We got draft analysts everywhere. I mean, do they get under your skin a little bit? It seems like you're getting kind of hot and bothered about these people who, have their takes about the draft.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand they've made a cottage industry out of it, and it's great for guys like us because we talk about the NFL 24/7. I mean, it's awesome. What irritates me is I really believe this. Joe Gibbs said this my rookie year sitting in a meeting. There are 10 to 12 teams that are really serious about winning a championship. Every now and again, you'll have an outlier that wins one. But there are 10 or 12 teams that are really serious about winning championships every year. The rest of the teams are just about building wealth and growing their franchise exponentially year over year.
Sure.
Every year. Yeah. Right. And they know that every single year, the value of their franchise is going to grow 20% or 15% or whatever it is, right? Sure. And so, I mean, that's what's fascinating to me. So what irritates me more than anything is that this is the ultimate team game. And I don't care how good an individual player is. It's like the wide receiver position. Like, at what point did we overvalue the wide receiver position so much? And I used to say this all the time. I could walk into the cafeteria at Fox and throw a ball to anybody. They could catch it and throw it back to me. If I set up a one-on-one drill, I'd whip their asses, right? I mean, it's just like there is no greater skill than moving a man from point A to point B against his will. And all you have to look at is the Super Bowl. But you look at the Super Bowl in general this year, Patrick Mahomes, who's a phenomenal player, just a phenomenal player. And they've got when it comes to roster-wise, the speed and athleticism of their receiving core and everything else, it's incredible, right? You can't block people. You can't dominate a line of scrimmage. you don't win consistently in the NFL. And that's the only thing that drives me nuts is the value that has been placed on, like, everybody is dependent. Every position is a dependent position, right?
Sure.
Like, but there's no more dependent position to me than wide receiver. If 10 other guys don't do their job exceptionally well, you will never see a football. It will never come your way. And yet we have all of a sudden made a wide receiver like the end all be all. Like, if we could just get a wide receiver, then we'd win a championship. You know, I've heard people say, no, that's never happened. It's never been like, there's no team in the history of football has ever been one receiver away from winning a world championship. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah. You're putting your cowherd hat on now.
Yes.
The wide receivers are the icing.
Yeah.
And the line is the flour and the milk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I love, like, I always
got a cowherd impression, right?
Oh yeah. Well, my it's always the same impression. Like, I can't go. I get my impression of Colin Cowherd is like, he states something that's completely obvious, and then he restates it, and then he states it over again, and eventually he gets you to buy into it. Like, you know what? He's right. And it's something that's so simple. It's like, NBA players are tall. They just are, you know, and you're like, oh my God, he's right. They are tall, you know, and he's like, and he just nails it. And you're like, oh yeah. And then you start to break it down. And you're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like, I have called Colin's show before, back when we were both at ESPN, just to yell at him, like listening to something he said that is completely wrong. And I've called up and go, put me on. I want to yell at Colin. Yeah. To his credit, he'll put you on to yell at him.
Yeah, no, he does do that. He's a big repeat guy, but to me, it's the analogies. I mean, the divorce analogies, the food analogies, the business analogies. You know, he'll be comparing. Like the other day, I did a bit where I was making fun of him, saying that he would compare Mac Jones to a minivan, whereas Trey Lance is a convertible. And then he came out and he was like, Mac Jones is a BlackBerry. Can't do anything with a BlackBerry in this day and age. And it was, there it is.
Yes.
There's the analogy of it.
Yes.
Funny.
And by the way, and he is like, here's what makes him great. And if any young broadcasters are listening, I think he's the best in the business at this. And this is what I think makes him great.
Yeah.
He will actually make you think, and to the point where you may change your mind. He'll bring up an analogy. Like, there are a lot of people that will come on and say something. I'm like, give me a break. Like, that ain't the way it works. And sometimes I do that with Colin, but there are times where he brings an analogy in, like you said, that's you know, has something to do with you know, finances or whatever it is. And you're like, wait a minute. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, that's actually a decent point. And then you're like, damn, maybe I should change my stance on this, you know? Like, I've caught myself in the car going, man, maybe I'm wrong. Am I wrong? Like, I got to look at, like, and you actually start to, at least, you know, some ideas start to germinate, and you think, maybe I need to change my way of thinking on that particular topic. And I think he is the best in the business at least, at the very least, making you think.
For sure. No, my wife, a lot of times, even my mom sometimes, like, if I get going about, like, you know, if I just get on my soapbox and I start to kind of rant a little bit, they're always, you're going a little cowherd on us. You just drop the cowherd, because I've listened to him for so long that now that has become how I try to, you know, make a point out of things, is to be able to relate it back to something that my wife would understand or whatever it is. So every now and then they're like, all right, cowherd, why don't you just take it down a few notches? So you're absolutely right.
Let me ask you a question, because I catch myself doing this all the time, and I'm thinking that people probably, as I'm walking through the airport, are like, you know, there's that crazy guy that's through here every week, right? Because like, I catch myself, like, I'm constantly talking to myself. So I got earbuds in or whatever, and I'm like teeing up questions for myself. Like, what if somebody asked me this? Boom. What do I think about this? And then I was like, well, you know, and I'm like, I'm constantly like teeing myself up and talking, and then that's a good one, you know. And I'm walking through the air, and then I catch myself. I realize, man, I've just done this whole 2.5 minute dialogue like I was on a radio show, and I'm only talking to myself. Like, do you catch yourself like in character? Do you catch yourself doing things all the time where you like look back and go, wait a minute, dude, like you gotta, like you're in a public setting or something, and all of a sudden you're doing Saban or whatever it is you're doing?
Yeah, and sometimes people will call me out on it, and so, but that's good for you that we have to wear masks now, because now you can talk to yourself however long, and nobody will care. But yeah, no, that'll definitely happen. Like either my buddies or like I said, my wife or my sister or something will be like, that was a little Kuiper there, like when I get going about like my favorite restaurants or something, I'm like, yeah, all of a sudden, I like Vito Provolone a lot, go to Italian. And they're like, all right, but yeah, so that happens. I don't talk to myself as much. I laugh at myself a lot. That's one thing I get caught up in, is I'm just like, and I say, if I can't laugh at myself, then what the hell's the point?
Right.
I feel you on the laughing part.
Yeah.
Talking not much.
I always like, I got into television and radio and all the things I do. And I'm just like, hey, listen, I'm only in this to entertain myself. I have a wildly popular show here in Colorado, a radio show in Colorado with my partner, Mike Evans. And that's the whole purpose of the show, is like, I'm only in this thing to entertain myself. If you're not entertained, switch the channel. I don't give a crap. Like, but I'm here to make myself giggle.
If you're not entertaining yourself, then the people listening probably aren't entertained. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if you're not having fun, then they can tell, and then they're not having fun.
Right. And then there are those who are like, sports. Like, oh, get off my ass. Like, you know what? I just want to I'm just an immature. Yeah, I'm like, I still look at myself in the mirror and see 22. So I'm like, whatever, I mean, it's just that I haven't grown up, and hopefully I never have to,
Me and my buddy call that man cave. All those guys are just man cave guys. They just want to, they got their jerseys hung up. They just want to talk about sports, and that's it.
Right.
That's not as fun all the time. There's times where it doesn't call for that. Like something I wanted to ask you about. Your son is a professional baseball player. Mm-hmm. So you grew up. I mean, he grew up, and while he was growing up, you were a baseball dad.
Uh-huh.
I grew up playing baseball. I had a lot of nightmare baseball dads and baseball coaches in my life. Did you run into nightmare baseball dads? Were you a nightmare baseball dad?
Yeah. I at times I was, yes. I mean, my wife is throwing me out of a game. So yes, I was that guy at times. It's interesting because my son was so much better than everybody else at a young age, right? I always had him play up a couple of years because he was just gifted. And part of that was the hand of God. There's nothing you can do. If you're gifted, you're gifted. The other part was 6 months of the year, I get up at 5:30 or whatever, go in and lift and come back home. I was home at 7:30 in the morning. And then all we did was play, like, hey, let's go play catch. Let's go goof around. Let's go whatever. And so, there's like his skill set was much higher than everybody else's skill set because, like I said, 6 months of the year, I'm just playing. Right. So, but one of the things that, and I've apologized to my son a million different times because there was times I was just an ass. But, my big thing was, I don't care if you strike out. I don't care if you're not any good. I don't care. The big thing was you're going to give effort because you're just so much better than everybody else. And so all it was an effort thing with me. As long as you're giving great effort, then I would never have a problem. But I'm coaching his little league team. He's probably 13 years old or whatever. And he laces, like, his nickname by the other dads was the franchise. Like, nice. How's the franchise feeling today? The franchise is good. The franchise can be all right. So he ropes this ball down the right field line. Lefty just pulls it down the right field line, and just, I mean,
you meant lefty, or was he naturally a lefty?
Naturally a lefty.
Naturally, nice.
Yeah. So he just, I mean, this thing is a frozen rope, and it's an old chain link little league fence. And sometimes you could see those ones that kind of bow out the wrong way. Yeah. I kid you not. He is trotting, watching his handiwork. That thing hits in the middle of that fence on this line drive and rebounds back to the right fielder. Like right, I mean, just right to the kid, right? I mean, it's probably 25 yards in the air, just boom, like a springboard back. He catches it. And then my son realizes that he's trotting. And all of a sudden, he takes off to second base, right? Well, he gets thrown out by about 6 feet, right? I mean, it should be a stand-up double if he's hustling, but he's just admiring his handiwork. And that it becomes the third out of the inning, right? And so he comes trotting back, and I meet him like beyond the first base. Like I meet him like
You're in the field. You're in the field of play.
I'm in the field of play, and I'm like, that lack of effort's absolute bullshit, and I can't, I'm mad, right? And I'm still playing at the time. I'm 295 in the off season, right? And I'm like, you little son of, So we get into the dugout, and we were the Silver Falcons, and so we had these white uniforms with silver and a royal blue piping on them, and they were sharp, right? And so he gets in the dugout, and I'm just giving him an earful about lack of effort and that's bullshit. You cost us that inning, right? And we had we had a run that would have scored. The whole thing, right? So as I'm giving him an earful, this little turd reaches out and grabs his Gatorade, like he earned a sip of Gatorade because of his hustle, right? I kid you not. I slapped that thing out of his hand, and everybody had red Gatorade sprayed all over their uniforms because everybody's just watching, scared to death.
Of course it was red too,
Right. So here's this 295, just big fat face, red and just angry. And my wife came to the dugout just crying. She goes, "You need to leave right now. You're embarrassing our family." And so. Yeah, so I had to leave that particular game, but there was it's interesting to me kind of how I could have never played quarterback or corner, and I'm not bashing on my own athleticism because I was an incredibly gifted athlete. Mentally, man, if I made one mistake in a game, I was going to make another mistake or two. It would just eat me up inside, right? I can't imagine throwing a pick and being like, whatever, it happens. That would kill me, right? It would just crush me. And I think one of the things about being a pitcher or whatever and having that kind of short memory, so I quit coaching when he went to high school. And I'm like, it's like the first game of his high school career. And I'm like, now it's just time to be that guy in the stands that's cheering on his kid, right? And just being calm. And I coached him all these years, and I made plenty of mistakes doing it. But you know what? This is going to be great. Now I'm just going to sit in the stands. So we're playing this school, and he is dealing, right? He's pitching. He's just dealing. He's through 3 innings, and I think he's got 8 strikeouts, right? He's just, he just is. He's just, yeah. Comes out for the 4th inning and proceeds to give up a hit, walk the bases loaded, walk in a couple of runs, and finally gets yanked, right? So now I'm like, hey, it's all right, man. It's all right, whatever, right? So we get in the truck and we're going to head home, after the game. And this is him. And this is probably why he was so good. I say to him, hey, man, sorry about today. Sometimes it just doesn't go the way you hope it's going to go. And I'm sorry you struggled. And he looked at me. He's like, struggled? Because I struck out the first 8 batters. And then I'm like, you little son of a bitch, you walk 6 guys, So, it is, I tend to, it's the offensive lineman in me. You got to be, if you're not an hour and a half early, you're late, and sure. The thing about playing offensive line is nothing good can happen. Right. You're like Terrell Davis. We talked about Terrell Davis in great shape. He can rush for 222 yards. Right. And at the end of the day, you can just have a tremendous game. The 5 guys up front can be great. And the best you are is a tagline at the beginning of that running back talking about his performance on the day. Like, hey, got to thank the big guys up front. Now let's talk about me for a while, and that's all you are, right? But you get
up those 2 sacks, you're fucked.
What's that?
You give up those 2 sacks,
you're the worst guy you're the worst guy that's ever played. Or if you get, the only time your name gets mentioned, if you get a holding call, that's the life of being an offensive lineman. You're completely motivated out of paranoia and fear. And so that's how my brain works. I automatically go to what's the worst case scenario, because this is probably what's going to happen. Anything above that is going to be bonus. So I
Right.
always looked at it that way, and he always just looked at it like, it's going to happen, but I'll focus on the good stuff. And it's probably pretty cool. I will tell you this: one of the great pleasures of my life is after coaching him all those years, and I knew he was, exceptionally talented. Not that I really knew baseball; I coached it, but my son made it to the majors by me saying, "Stay low, keep your knees bent, and throw strikes."
Go.
Like, but I promised him when he was 12 years old that I would never go to Fenway, I'd never go to Wrigley, and I'd never go to Yankee Stadium unless he was pitching in them. So this is my promise to you. I'll never do that because I won't go to those historic stadiums unless you're pitching in those stadiums. And I've seen him pitch in all three stadiums. My first trip to Fenway, my first trip to Wrigley, my first trip to the Yankees was watching him pitch in those stadiums. And so I've got the plaque. I promised him when he's 12 years old. He made a pet plaque for Christmas once of me and him at Wrigley and me and him at Fenway, and it's just really a special, it's a special bond that we have athletically, and I'm the idiot that still catches him. He's actually with the Pirates right now. He's transitioned to the other side, in the management side, but we still are out in the yard playing catch and goofing around, and it's kind of a field of dreams moment, if you will, for me.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That's I feel that's what it's every dad's dream. Like at some point, every dad that has a son, I feel like is like, yeah, I'd like to have him in the majors one day, no matter what they say. So that's awesome, dude.
What's funny is I still catch him, and he still throws in the mid 90s. I don't catch him for 60 feet 6 inches because I'm too old and I can't see well enough. But I always tell people this story. Your mom has probably heard this story on Mike and Mike, but I'm sure you haven't. So my son gets drafted by Arizona in the first round, and they've got this old funny clause in their contracts from their rookie contract is still back from 1947 or something. Okay. And it's just this weirdo clause, and we weren't, we just were in a place where like this clause has to be taken out. This is a bad, it's bad, right? Anyhow, sure. We don't ever exercise that clause. Don't worry about it, that type of thing. And anyhow, so it took him a while to sign. And so he's at home, and he's trying to get ready to go to to wherever they're going to put him in the minors, right? Yeah. And so he's like, he needs to throw a bullpen. And he can't find the kid. The kid that normally catches him was his high school catcher that was in the minors as well. So he wasn't around. So he's like, man, I got to throw today. Today's the day I got to throw, and I can't find anybody to catch me. All right, I'll catch you. I got no gear. I just got a catcher's mitt, right? So I'm like, hey, take it easy. Let's just kind of smooth it out. And just,
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So now he's throwing to me, and I am just like, bam, bam, bam. Bam, I'm stabbing things, right? Now I'm feeling my oats because at the time, I was only retired for a few years, and I'm like, I'm probably 40, 41, right? I'm like, man, things are good. Like, and I'm sticking. So, we're at 60 feet 6 inches, but I'm like stabbing these things, and he's probably throwing 65, 75%, whatever. Yeah. So now I'm just like, go ahead and launch one. And he's 96, 97 consistently. And he goes, you sure? I'm like, sure. Yeah. I mean, you see me over here? I'm freaking stabbing these damn things, right? He lets one loose, Joey, and I go to put my glove there, and he just goes wham and hits me right in the nipple. I mean, just drops me like a freaking sack of potatoes. I'm on the ground, and I'm holding on to my chest, right? And I swear, I was like, I'm going to have to fish my nipple out of my pants and go have it reattached at the hospital up the street. I mean, it almost stopped my heart. And he comes running over, and I'm rolling on the ground. I mean, I took 96 just directly to the nipple, just flushed. No. I didn't even get my glove. My glove was like, wham! Right. So, yeah. Anyhow, finally, I get up off the ground, and now he thinks it's the funniest thing ever. Like, he thinks this is hilarious, right? So we go in, and I take my shirt off, and I kid you not, black, blue, and yellow, and you could see the seams went right across directly across my nipple. I mean, it just flushed me up, and I swore off catching him for a couple of years. I play catch, but I wouldn't catch him, and
Right.
of course I'm back to catching. But now I'm smart enough to say, okay, if you're going to throw to me, we're going to be about 80 feet apart. So I have a little bit more reaction time now. And he doesn't throw quite as hard. You know, he's still 90, 94, 95, but he doesn't throw quite as hard as he did back then. So, yeah, but I took one right off the nipple there.
Thank God that it didn't. I mean, that's scary stuff. Right? I mean, that could have fucking put you down.
could have just stopped my heart. Or I think like what if it hit me in the teeth? What if it hit me in the face?
Right. I mean, so many worse options than having a funny story to be able to tell later on.
Right.
Last thing I got for you, Mark, this has been awesome. You mentioned that earlier. You mentioned the people in Indianapolis always kind of really giving you shit because you were talking the truth about their team. But do you still? What's the situation with Mike Vanderjagt? You still got some beef with Mike Vanderjagt?
No, no, I don't. I never had any beef with him. I just like don't tell me how tough you are. Like you're a kicker, and like and the thing why most of us hate kickers. It's not that I hate kickers. I mean, Jason Elam's a good friend of mine. I love Jason Elam. I love the guys that Chip Lowmiller that kicked in Washington when I was there. I love all those guys. Yeah, I truly do as guys. I think the issue with most of us as players is we're jealous, right? Because like I used to call them campus leavers. We're in the middle of grinding through meetings and they're running to McDonald's, or they're going, hey, I'm going to go home for a cup of coffee and see my wife, whatever. Like, and you're like, you guys are just like, that irritates me. And then you're out just beating the living snot out of one another. And you look over to where they're at on the other field and they're having a little game like coffin corner kicking game, right? Like, and each guy is trying to see how close they can put it let me see how close I can put it to the pylon. Meanwhile, you just opened up a gash on your nose because your helmet came down and hit you. You just jammed a finger and your finger's broken, and there's no time. It doesn't matter that your finger broke. You got to get back in there and get another rep. And you just look over and they're like, oh, good kick right in the corner. And you're like,
my favorite is for the punters when the punters just like drop the ball and they work on the ball placement.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Drop it and bounce
over and over again.
Yes. Oh, it drove me. It drives you nuts, So, and at least the kickers that I played with understood that what they did was a skill that, very few people have, but they also understood that they weren't quote unquote football players. They were kickers, and they embraced that about themselves. And so I was like, Tom Ruin was our punter in Denver when I was here. Tommy and I are great friends and love Tommy, but they wouldn't pretend that they were out there, smashing helmets. So I always appreciated those guys for that.
Oh, I love it, man. Mark, this was great to talk finally and meet via Zoom, and I appreciate your time, and I hope that we can continue to chat, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your day for me. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, anytime. You know how to get a hold of me, so anytime be a pleasure.